Hello, everyone. I'm Julia Reuter. I'm the Dean of the Glorya Kaufman School of Dance, and thank you. And I am just so happy to invite you all here to celebrate with us hip hop's 50th anniversary, Kaufman style. This is a festival centering dance and hip hop as a global phenomenon. This is a three-part series. We started this evening's series, which is focused on celebrating hip-hop dance scholarship, and we started that with the amazing presentation by DJ Lene Denise. On DJ scholarship, our next two events will be a celebration of kinetic innovation, a birthday party, which will be on September 30th. On the McCarthy Quad here. We have guests in the house, I believe, Versatile and some folks, yes, so they'll be featured, yes. And then on October 4th, we'll be back here in our courtyard, and we will be celebrating community and collaboration. And we will have everything raw and a bunch of guest artists and some battles, so please join us. There are many people who make such events possible. Of course, we want to thank Visions and Voices, USC's Arts and Humanities Initiative, Executive Director Daria Yurkovsky, who's here with us. We also want to thank Robin Romans, who's Associate Vice Provost of the Arts and Academic Affairs, for their generous support of Hip Hop 50. I also want to mention that Visions and Voices is going to present choreographer Efrat Usheri, dance, a company rooted in African American and Latino forms, and club dance. And they're going to be here at USC on October 19th, Thursday, 7:30 p.m. in the Bovard Auditorium. You don't want to miss this production. It's called Underscored. It's created and performed by members of the company with some legendary New York City's 70s and 80s club dancers. So it's a real celebration of the underground scene. It will start off with a conversation with the artist, and then it's going to end with a dance party. So make sure you are there in all your gorgeousness, okay? A few others to thank. Of course, we want to thank our benefactor, Glorya Kaufman, members of our board of counselors, and also donors who are in attendance this evening. I also want to extend a lot of gratitude, so much gratitude to members of our Kaufman community whose vision and support have made this possible. Artistic lead and curator, Professor D. Sabela Grimes. Our superhero of strategy and logistics, Dane Martins. Also faculty and staff. So I'll just talk a little bit. Dance was at the beginning, and at the very beginning was at the center of experimentation around hip hop and cultural identity and expression in that particular form. So as a school, we really wanted to center dance. We are the home, we believe, of one of the largest and most talented contingents of hip hop dance faculty in the nation. Really wanted to center dance in the center of these conversations and also foreground the contributions, as DJ Lene Denise mentioned before, of women, female identifying, and also LGBTQIA members of that community. So to this end, we're thrilled to have members, some of the most incredible voices of hip hop scholarship here. We have Dr. Mary Fogarty, yes. We have Dr. Imani Johnson. We have Dr. Naomi Bragin. Of course, DJ Lene Denise. We also have with us Professor Moncell Durden. I just want to also mention this heavy book that I have in my arms right here. Yes, really fantastic compendium, most expansive and comprehensive on hip-hop dance studies, so we want to honor that, edited by Dr. Fogarty and Dr. Johnson. And what I've been thinking about a lot when we're creating this festival is, just as dance was at the core of the experimentation of hip hop, when we think of anniversaries, we think of time, right? And we think of the passing of time and birthdays and all the time that has gone into it. And I'm also thinking about bodies of work. This is something that DJ Lene Denise brought up as well. So as dancers and practitioners, we think of our bodies of work, right? we can think of them as bodies of work, W-O-R-K, also bodies of work, W-E-R-K, yes. So we know that, and we know that that research, primarily in a school like ours, which is focused on performance, a lot of that happens in the studio, right? So that research happens in the daily practice of dance. It happens in the improvisation that we do. It happens in the choreographic explorations that we do. It also, the body of work builds through the performances we do as performers and choreographers, and also in the work that we embody of others, right? So we embody the body of work of others. So that's, kind of commonly what we are known for in dance. But there's this whole realm, and why we're having this celebration tonight, of scholarship, right, in a different way. People that are bringing together many different methodologies beyond those that are used in the studio, and bringing theory and practice together. So when we think of some of the ideas that DJ Lene Denise brought up in terms of DJ scholarship, digging through the crates, some of these cultural practices and methodologies, and chasing sampling, there are ways that dancers are doing this as well, through choreographic analysis, through doing oral histories, from embodied practice, from all kinds of ethnographies. So we want to honor that tonight, and I'm going to turn it over now to a practitioner and a pedagogue who is intentionally artful and artfully intentional in everything that he does, Professor D. Sabela Grimes.
Thank you, Dean Ritter. Peace, good people. We're going to begin the way we end and end the way we begin. First and foremost, so that we have a very nice blend. We just want to have the jump off here to speak to what happened prior to this panel, unpanel, right? This conversation that we're about to have. Who would like to first speak? And we're going to bring you in the room if you weren't here for this amazing musical essay that DJ Lene Denise just really curated and created an experience for us. We're kind of immersed in these histories. So any of you all want to just jump off and make these connections?
I had a question come up while you were speaking, and thank you so much for just the really deep and complex way that you're talking about and framing hip-hop by bringing in house and bringing in techno and bringing in funk and disco. I was hoping maybe you could riff a little bit on the cultural practice. I was thinking about the cultural practice of DJs watching the dancers, and how that is a cultural practice of studying the dancer in DJ scholarship.
That's amazing. Thank you for that question and for listening closely. So Samuel A. Floyd, a musicologist, wrote in his book, The Power of Black Music, that it in fact is dancers who help to create genre. And I said, wait a minute, that's actually hugely important because oftentimes DJs are witnesses of the dancers, right? And so it means something to me, the interdependence, the reliance, the trust, the telepathic communication. And to be honest, sometimes what happens when there are dancers who maybe are moving off beat, no, I mean this, and how that impacts the rhythm and the desire to have this sort of cohesive body moving together. So I think it's just a complex relationship where we are indebted to each other and responsible for each other.
Thank you for that. Did you want to share something?
Okay. Yes, thank you for that and the question, which brings to mind, a discussion I had recently, and I think this is in common knowledge for most people, but just looking at the whole 50th thing, I think most of us may agree a lot of it has been MC heavy, and the fact that if it were not for the dancers dancing to a specific part of the record, but if it also wasn't for Herc paying attention to what was, what they were getting down to, who knows where this might have went. But it's also, in terms of black practice, it's still that relationship you had in jazz dancing, because the dancers are in front of live musicians who are getting their riffs, especially the drummers, getting their riffs from what dancers are doing. But dancers understanding music in a deeper way, being able to be in dialogue with them. And so there's a continuation that hip hop is doing, even if that's not being discussed or the dancers and DJs don't know it. It's a continuation of how we are engaged with one another in the space and how we're listening to one another in wholly.
Thank you. Imani, Mary, you want to add to the mix, or?
I mean, nothing in particular, but I'll say thank you, Lene, for one thing that I really appreciate in your presentation, among all the things I appreciate in your presentations, is drawing attention to the way that number 50 has socioeconomic, political, the Afro-diasporic. There are trajectories, there are things to look at and deepen an understanding of that 50 years. I refer to it as the 50-ish anniversary to capture that it's not meant, to me, it can't possibly be some sort of stable, static number, but it gives us room to spend time with and think about what that moment opens up, but also like what deepens in an exploration of the 50.
When you were speaking and talking about the DJ, it turns me on so much as a dancer because I've got such a close relationship to the DJs in my life, and I feel like DJs carry so much knowledge with them. So when I got into breaking, it was a female DJ at a club in Canada, in London, Ontario, AJ, and she played funk music from like 74 to 78 and made us all want to dance and keep increasing our vocabulary just to get involved in that music. And I think it really continued on when I started to research in the academy, building with DJ Renegade, when I'd see him at jams and talking about music. And Forrest Gedham Gump was really influential when he was touring around the UK where I was studying. I went record shopping with him, and I can remember him going through records and talking to me about how you can look at an album cover, but it doesn't tell you what's inside. And it's like a lesson that carries with you when you think about anti-Black racism in institutions, and also for me, because I'm an unlikely character in the hip hop mix, to think, you can't really get to know, there's sometimes a discrepancy between what's on the cover. So you're talking about the beautiful covers that inspired you to kind of go deeper, and I also love that message of you don't know where you're going to find that sample or that sound that's going to really inspire you. So there's something about that for me in my draw to hip hop and the scholarship that we do about how we look deeper and where we're looking for those kind of unlikely things that can move us.
Thank you for that question. So check this out. There's a line by KRS-One, right, in My Philosophy. And part of that line literally became a mantra for a lot of people. And when I think about the five of you, when I think of you all when I hear this line, and My Philosophy says, I haven't come to tell you I got juice. I just produce, create, innovate on a higher level. I'll be back, but for now, just, yes, right? And so I introduced that sort of lyric because we now have these sort of relationships with these institutions, and you all bear these titles like hip hop scholar. And it's so interesting that you would bring up Trisha Rose's Black Noise when being a hip hop scholar was not sexy in the institute. Is it sexy now? I don't know, but right? So, like, what is your thinking around these sort of ideas of what a hip hop scholar is in relationship to the multiplicity of practices that inform what you do to then edit a book like this, right? And what's the labor in trying to get practitioners and scholars together to put together, and then, so many questions, right? And I just want to put that out for everyone to just really think about the invisible labor, right, that we take on as hip hop scholars. It's so funny, Versus Scholars over here, Ernie was kind of giving me a look. Very few people, and we know this, that, this is a cipher we're having. And to be in this culture means that you always have to be ready. Whereas some people can just hide in the institution and be an expert, but we in these streets. So I just said a mouthful. I just want to give you all something to play with. Who wants to dive in first?
Okay, Mary's looking at me, so I will go. There was a lot to your question, yo. I'm not quite sure where to start. I will say, in terms of our relationship to these institutions, I think, so I went to undergrad at UC Berkeley in the 90s, where there was a student-led class on Tupac and Tupac's lyrics that I didn't take, actually. Because I was like, he's not my favorite MC. But I had options, So this is me having access, not knowing I'm having access to something that wasn't a thing, assuming, well, yeah, okay. And taking it for granted. I have an older brother who's also a professor, and his university at some point asked him to teach hip hop classes. And I think there was like a generation of folks who were teaching in universities about hip hop because universities started to recognize that it can put butts in seats. But it wasn't like necessarily people for whom like that was their research. It wasn't their primary research. It was something that they did because they could, because they enjoyed it, and it was an opening up, right? But you fast forward, and now there are people who are coming to the academy, to hip hop studies, as practitioners first. They're learning the research from doing the work. And so I think that there's a different set of lessons in there. I am coming off of a very, academic track, a traditional academic track, not in an arts program or department. At the same time, like as I'm learning how to do ethnography, because I'm doing ethnography in street dance spaces, I'm learning from hip hop how to be there, how to talk to people, how to engage, what my responsibility is, what my role is. My monograph, my book my research focused around breaking ciphers and really like learning how to be in the cipher as a participatory, responsible witness. I'm part of that circle, not necessarily because I'm going inside, but because that circle is an entire dynamic and exchange among people. It's not just about the individual. So I learned a lot about how to do research responsibly, do research in communities that are vulnerable for lots of different kinds of reasons. And, coming through the academy, recognizing the often distorted ways or the erasure of Black folks in a lot of different, all these different fields. So there was something to learning about research from hip hop communities wherein there's already kind of an embedded, in a very academic-y way, I'll say counter-hegemonic kind of pulse, subversiveness within the culture that trained me and that I learned a lot from other practitioners who are also just deep researchers. And eventually coming to the point of recognizing that I do identify as a hip hop scholar. It took a minute once I figured out that I'm staying and I'm not just dipping and diving, that I would own that, but also recognize that to be in academic spaces necessitates that the academy change too. It's not just about adapting hip hop to here. That doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. Oof. Yes, finger snaps. Thank you. Are you grabbing microphones? You going next? You got next? No, that was perfect. Thank you so much.
So, something that comes to mind.
Hold on, not to cut you off, God. Not to cut you off. I ain't trying to cut your wisdom, God. Did you all just see that smile and that laugh? We've known each other for so long. Literally, when we first started here, every time we see each other on campus, we just would go, how'd they let us in here? Please continue.
So my journey has definitely been different, and I have an interesting relationship with institutions. So I first started teaching in universities in 2003 as an adjunct. And I didn't go to college. I had no interest in teaching. It happened. It grew on me. I was recommended to teach at University of the Arts in Philadelphia and Drexel University in Philadelphia, and they hired me. And the thing that sort of sparked this interest in me to do research was two things. Baba Chuck Davis would always say, if you want to understand culture, study the dance. If you want to understand the dance, study the people. He would always say that, which led me to, because I'm now hired to work in this university, my thinking was I can't go in here with playground knowledge. It's a private institution. These students pay a lot of money to go here. I want to have something that, for me at the time, was on the level of what they're paying for in their other classes. So I began to take classes and audit classes. I would audit ballet classes. I would take contact improv. I took Dunham classes. I would sit in modern classes and watch, because I wanted to understand how they were teaching. And I wanted to understand the language that they were using to connect. Because of Baba Chuck Davis, I started studying neuropsychology, anthropology, and linguistics, and ethnomusicology on my own. And being in institutions, I had access to classes. So I'm like, okay, I can sit in this class. And even though I didn't go here, I can, talk to the professor and learn some stuff in that way. And it was really my interest to get students to, well, one, for me to have a deeper rooted understanding of my cultural heritage. So I see myself as a tradition bearer. I don't know if you would call me a scholar. Maybe you would, but I'm a tradition bearer. And I'm going to talk the truth as much as I can talk the truth. I'm going to give you the connections, because at that time, what I was coming across was a lot of people who did not know, didn't care to know, and were just teaching the status quo. And one of the things that set me off in University of the Arts was one of the students had asked one of the professors what jazz dance was. And I've been doing jazz dance since I was 2. And the professor said, I don't know, whatever that stuff is they're doing now, I guess it's called jazz. And I'm like, for what you pay to go here, that's not a sufficient answer. So I came in with a whole bunch of footage and I showed them, and we had a discussion. And it was everything that I had been studying and putting together to offer them as much information about cultural knowledge as I possibly could, to get them to rethink the cultures that they come from, to find the similarities through differences. And I have just been on that trajectory ever since, wanting and being inspired to understand more and to always ask why. And my navigating these institutions, I've been blessed to be in 9 different universities, introducing hip hop to 8 of them. And that whole time, it's just been like, how can I honor my elders? How can I honor my ancestors? And how can I bring forth a different understanding of what hip hop dance is to these communities, spaces, places, people, understandings, and even for myself? So it's just been that. I don't care what the politics of universities are. I don't really play the politic game. I'm gonna come in here and say what I gotta say. You either gonna like it or have an issue with me. But it's just like, if we're talking about this, you need to understand this is what this is where it comes from, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of it. Yeah.
What? Oh, yeah. I was going to talk about myself, which I'm not really. I'm like, I have some stories. I was thinking about how when I went to my first year university, I took some classes and I thought, I think I could do this better than them. It was such a big girl mentality. I was listening to my professor and I thought, I want to do that. So I remember having a clear sense at like 20 years old. I was like, I would like to be a professor, live in the world of ideas. That's my jam. I think that's why I like hip hop too. And whether people are creating through movement, like Migas from the Boogie Brats from Toronto, he's an idea man. He had so many ideas that he brought, so much vocabulary he brought to breaking, and moved me every time I got to see him dance. And couldn't believe that I got to see him dance in a club and that people weren't studying him. I was just like, what he's doing with his dance is the art of my time. And I feel the same way about ideas, whether it's with hip hop intellectuals in the community or, in a university setting. I think bringing that breaking mentality of wanting to have original ideas, like I don't want to just regurgitate what I do. This is why I love your work, Naomi, so much as well. You always want to bring new ideas to the mix. We're not just here to kind of record or let you hear what we heard people talk about or their histories on the street. We want to bring originality to the process. So the handbook for me was, I think that was part of what we wanted to do, and also bring those voices in closer conversation where those conversations aren't always happening. I'll say maybe one other anecdote, because I never share this, but it has to do with your conference and the invisible labor of throwing a hip-hop conference, and even just choosing the panels and bringing people together and really cultivating those conversations like you do, Imani. I was remembering when you brought Fred Moten in to moderate a panel, and I remember, and he was just moderating. He just was facilitating the conversation, and I remember walking away thinking, I wish it had been a conversation with him, that, the other people on the panel were kind of talking to each other about what it is to be a professor of hip hop in relationship to the institutions. And I thought, here's this brilliant intellectual that's moving culture and ideas. And I sometimes want those professors in the mix. When I studied with Simon Frith, who's one of the most interesting thinkers when it comes to music on the planet, I want him in conversations with people in hip hop. So I guess maybe that's part of what the invisible labor we're doing is. Sometimes you just want to bring worlds and ideas together that you see. And I guess that's me talking about the embodied stuff I like from hip hop and where I see it going with, I hope, the institution. Like, I hope that's the remix that we're going to come up with.
Yeah, I would like to talk about this idea of hip-hop scholarship in terms of unsettling. That's the word that keeps coming up for me, unsettling. Partially because for me, my experience of writing my book has been an experience of being unsettled. And, it's difficult to do work on cultural histories with folks who are living because it's complex, and culture is always changing, and we have complex relationships, and we're also just crazy humans too. But I began to really appreciate the feeling of being uncomfortable and uneasy and unsettled, because that actually let me know that I cared about the work that I was doing. And, I'm not really invested in having the label hip hop attached to what I do. In fact, I'd kind of like to unsettle, the word hip hop. I hope that some of my work does that, because it keeps us more on the innovative edge, of what it means to do these dances and create these dances. This land that we're on, we don't own this land, the university doesn't own this land, actually. So I think that if a hip-hop scholar has any obligation, it's actually to unsettle the terms of the institution and unsettle the terms of scholarship. When I came I first started out doing my master's at UC Berkeley, and actually Sabela came in and performed for a hip hop conference that we did at that time. And Imani, that's actually when I met you. It was really a trip. I was in this folklore program at Berkeley in the anthropology department, and people started saying, "Oh, go to Naomi, she's the hip hop expert." And I was like, oh my God, if anyone from the dance world heard that, they would literally laugh, bah ha ha me out of the space, that's not how we run things in street dance culture. And, but yet there's something about the kind of hierarchical ways that academia has historically worked, that people have to be named experts of their fields. And of course, that's been a historically patriarchal way of functioning. And so I think that for me, unsettling is a way of like not becoming too comfortable in the ways that the institution works. And so sometimes when I hear something like hip hop scholarship or hip hop studies, I'm like, I get a little bit worried because I'm like, okay, are we just gonna then conform to the narrative or the structure in the system? So yeah.
Yeah, thank you all. Do you want to share anything?
You know, I'm thinking about, and I appreciate the idea of unsettling hip hop, the term, and kind of detaching from it and therefore staying close to a kind of edge and like an innovative edge. I'm thinking about how hip hop is responsible for kind of shaping my critical consciousness at a certain time and preparing me for James Baldwin and Toni Morrison and Zora Neale Hurston, because it's a kind of folk knowledge, right, and cultural production that was happening by working class black folks. I'm thinking about the fact that James Baldwin did not have a college degree, right, that he had a high school diploma. I'm thinking about Greg Tate, who did not have a college degree, and how Greg Tate told me, A, get into these institutions, right, but stay on the margins, right, and use it as a line of income to continue to develop your work, right, and teach. And I'm thinking about, you know, like the role of Toni Morrison's fiction in philosophy departments and English departments and cultural studies departments, right? Like, and so I feel like I'm thinking about Bell Hooks and the way that she kind of pushed up against academic writing, radically so, intentionally so. And so for me, you know, Zora Neale Hurston is a kind of self-taught anthropologist, you know. And so those are my models. Those are the ancestors in my line of work. Those are not folks who are necessarily degreed, but degreed folks have to get, you know, through their work in order to become degreed.
Say word. And Zora Neale Hurston was also a choreographer. Come on, she was, oh my God. Oh man, this Capricorn theme, I tell you. We can't have no Capricorn themes in Virgo season. Let's just be very clear. Shout out to the Virgos. So thank you all for that. How y'all doing? You okay? We good? We eating up in here, and these folks is cooking. So here we are, right? Hip Hop 50-ish. Thank you, Imani. At USC. My first time being on campus ever when I was at UCLA was to see a film that a film student was screening called Boys in the Hood. First time I ever came to this campus. The next time I came to this campus was to work with Visions and Voices. Shout out to Taj and Jessica Koslow and Sasha, to work with Miss Prissy, Lil C, Miho, King Charles, Storybird, you know, like just a list of amazing, Crucial, if y'all know who Crucial is. And it was dance, and there was this sort of a whisper at the time that there may be a dance school. And I thought it was really amazing that there was dance happening, dance classes, but when you think about coming to a university that started a dance school, right, only 10 whatever years ago, you're also talking about a university that's over 100 years old and didn't think that there was value. Y'all not hearing me, I'm just talking, my bad. Maybe, allegedly, didn't see the value in what we bring. And when I interviewed, I remember I said black a trillion times, because I didn't think I was going to get hired anyway. And I also talked about methodology over content. so many institutions will hire you to come, shout out to my family, UCLA, come just show them the moves. Yes, we don't care really about intentionality, methodology. Y'all hearing me right now? So let's really like speak to what's available to us in these institutions that for some is very subversive, and if you're in the life, it is what we do. It's the beingness that we bring to the institution. You follow me? It's that hip hop, house, fill in the blank is a way of life. And then my last thing, I know I keep throwing a whole bunch out at you. I just want you to just pick and choose. Is the reason I said black is because this is also a place that the erasure is so easy. They just handing out erasers. You feel me? They just be like, here, take this. And why it's so important that we think about a hip hop dance, how, and I'm really feeling this unsettling. Like, we have a generation of people who maybe not be attached to this idea that this is hip hop. And we've become sometimes very rigid and fixed on the name, when in the cultural practice, we understood temporality. We understand a relationship with time. The nene is here today, it's gone tomorrow, and we're on to the next, right? And so just speak to some of these things I'm throwing out there, and continue to paint and cook. That was the pass off, so I shouldn't be looking at you. Divert my eyes, I apologize. I see you thinking, neighbors. I think about, when we were in Switzerland, right? Think about like what that was like for us to be trying to teach some moves, and y'all know street dancers will talk a hole in your head about trying to bring context, right? Yo, in the club back in 56th Street and whoop-de-woo, we was right. And what is that? What is the incentive behind that? What's our anxiety to in real time speak to? I'm not here just to show you a move. These moves have meaning. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to address your question. I'm not sure what exactly. It wasn't like a specific question.
It's not a question.
But I do want to enter into this question of content related to moves and steps. I feel like I can speak a lot to that because that's a lot what I was working through in my book. And I want to actually go straight into dance, into what we know as hip hop and street dance in a global contemporary setting, because I feel like now for probably the young folks in the room, or the younger generation of dancers, like it's not hard to understand hip hop and street dance as global and contemporary. Like you just go on the internet, you're on social media, and one of the primary ways that now our culture is growing and dispersing is through these international battles and competitions. And in that context, what you often see is you see styles, right? So you see, you can enter a battle as a popper, you can enter a locking battle, you can enter hip hop or breaking, right? So you see these separate styles. And also, at the same time, because this is interrelated with the studio, you can now go to a studio and take a class in popping, or you can choose to, I want to learn how to lock, so I can take this class in locking or this class in hip hop, and so there's this separation of the dances into styles. And I'm just riffing, by the way, so feel free to jump in and be like, cut her off. But a lot of how those styles became what they are is because of the work of dancers to create lexicons, right? So essentially like vocabularies of steps and moves that go under those styles. And that important labor that dancers have been doing is very much because dancers wanted to protect their cultural histories. They wanted to protect the dance forms. And so that's very important work to develop these lexicons. At the same time, when you develop a lexicon, the dance becomes vulnerable to being objectified, because then you have the steps and the moves you can identify. Then you can identify the style. Oh, that's popping. Oh, that's locking. You know, let me go take this class and let me just learn these few steps, and then I can learn how to lock, and I can be a locker, right? And so it's like this double-edged sword, I guess is what I'm saying, is that, you know, both at the same time, what we went through as dance practitioners is, you know, finding ways to preserve and to preserve ourselves in history, to create, okay, I talk about, for example, in my book, a lot about like the naming of moves, like Scooby-Doo, naming after dancers, Scooby-Doo, the Skeeter Rabbit, you know, the Leo walk, etc. And of course, those are very gendered. There's a gendered aspect of that naming, which often women drop out of those histories, unless you know the deeper stories. So we're preserving it. At the same time, the culture becomes more susceptible to objectification and commodification, you know? And so, like for me, this idea of, you know, steps and moves, we have to really look at the kind of complexity that I believe DJ Linnea was talking about in your talk, you know, about looking beyond hip hop as just like this one sole thing, but really in relationship to genres like funk, disco, house, you know, the complexity and the fluidity with which actually people create culture. You know, and that's something that I'm really interested in my work, is to be able to think about how these cultures are also relational, and also how people speak multiple languages. Mm-hmm. You know, we actually speak across, and dancers move across borders and boundaries. Like when we look at hip hop, yes, hip hop culture came out of this specific place in New York, right? But dancers were already looking at what was happening in Cali, you know, and Cali was blowing up in terms of boogaloo, in terms of popping, you know, and dancers were already recognizing themselves in each other. They were like, oh, I see you. I see you over, you know, in LA, or, you know, I see you in Oakland, you know, and I recognize this kinship. You know, so I'm really interested in the kinds of kinships, not biological, but kinships that are created through movement. You know, that dancers were actually finding ways to relate to each other and affiliate. So now locking and popping are seen as hip hop, right? So I'm obviously going off the top. I hope it's speaking a little bit to what you put out there. But yeah, just, I guess a takeaway for me would be to always be careful about the ways that our culture can become easily commodified and objectified.
Yeah, I agree. In these institutions, it's easy to get seduced in being the authoritative voice and going, this is what it is. But being in the community and the community is going, it could be that. Right? Did you want to say something? No.
That was a lot. What you put forth on the table. So I'm making a nice little Chipotle plate.
Get you a plate.
And then to connect to what Naomi was saying, I used to say, I don't know how I feel about this now, but I used to say, if I'm 80 years old and people still talking about hip hop, I'm gonna jump out a window. Because I was like, what's the next thing coming? And stop making everything hip hop. But I'm not fixated. And so that undoing, I'm not fixated on the name hip hop. A deeper part of it is the practice that we do as human beings and the lived experience that brings that about, and then it gets this label. But in hip hop, having this, August 11th, that's a cute narrative. That's a nice little story you want to tell, but no, this is deeper than that. And if we stick with that, then we don't connect to what came before it. And for a culture that was always talking about, you got to know your knowledge, then y'all better stop starting there, and let's connect to the deeper thing. So I'm thinking about a lot that you said. So it's just coming. And one of the things is like even not recognizing dance, or maybe in particularly not hip hop dance, but there was a moment in American history where European dances had to sort of come back into a space of like, yes, this is worthy of doing, right? Social dancing was just social dancing. And so between 1879 and 1884 or 86, you had different organizations that would pop up, like the Association for Professionals in Dancing. You had the Chautauqua Movement. I think that was in 1886, could be wrong. But these different organizations popped up to say, dance is important, and we need to start doing it. We need to remember these social dances, and we're going to teach them, and it's going to become this. So there's this codification of how you approach dance. There's also the way in which you look at dance that sort of excludes other dance forms, because we're going to create this practice that says this is dance, and we value this. So anything outside of that scope, right, is a very parochial way of looking at it, but they're like, well, we don't recognize this as dance. And so institutions have been battling with that ever since. You're talking over 100 years old, of how we look at the importance of dance. The Chautauqua movement was something that happened in upstate New York, and it was telling kids, you know, we're going to use this as to promote social decorum and to promote health and all these different things. But we're not looking at the social practice and what it means. And we definitely have a tendency as human beings to move forward because of whatever is going on in our lived experience, and not and keep the practice and lose the context of why the thing is important. And that becomes my issue with hip hop. And I'm not saying, I'm speaking to the choir, I realize this, but you know, even from the label, we want to talk about 73. So what were they doing? And we all know they didn't call it hip hop. It doesn't actually, you know, Michael Hallman in the January issue of the Village Eye in 1982 is when it's like, this is hip hop. But we have a bunch of different names before then. And we have a bunch of different dances that people are just bringing to the table and just living their life. And it gets labeled, and then that becomes the issue, because then we can't get past the label. And then it's also something that will, for those who are living in the 70s, if we sort of bring up this debate about how we can look at this, then it's almost like we're negating their lived experience. And it's like, no, it's not that, but we're really trying to tether this to a richer experience culturally. And so there's just a lot of stuff to consider. When I'm rambling and I'm thinking about just the different things that you said. It's just like from that cultural perspective, I think it's really important to understand what dance is, and this is going to be a little bit biased because I made it up, but I have a definition for dance, which is discovering the autobiographical self, negotiating creativity and expression. All human beings are in discovery of their own narrative. What's going on? What is the story? What are we negotiating? We're negotiating our space, our culture, our mind, our gender, our ideas, our sexuality, yada, yada, yada. The creativity then becomes the production of those things, and the expression is the space that we allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough to share our inner core feelings with others, but more importantly, ourselves, because human beings have a tendency to deny self before anything else. So when we look at what the dance is doing, culturally, socially, how it speaks to the economics and politics and environment and spiritual practice and whatnot, to get a fuller understanding of the human experience, then we can maybe jump off the labels for a second and understand the commonalities between these different eras, how the music shifts and now what we're doing to it, but how this speaks to that experience, that human experience. I think that's a worthy thing to talk about sometimes, and not get caught up in the, keeping it real hip hop world where we have to, and it's this, and I, and you wasn't there at the club, and so on and so forth. And like this, there's so much more to talk about, and that's one of the things I think this book is going to do. And I know I'm rambling, so I'm gonna shut up right now, because.
Thank you.
So I'm fine with the term hip hop. I'm probably a little bit more. I'm fine with it in part because of just how much I've learned over the years. It's shaped my world, but also purposeful about using it or trying to use it in expansive ways, recognizing it's dynamic, it's a culture. There are things that I love that just aren't registering for younger folks, and there's things that they're loving that they can teach me about. My relationship to that language, in my own work, it's in part about drawing out the elements that are subsumed under it, but are there nonetheless. So my book is titled Dark Matter and Breaking Ciphers, The Life of Africanist Aesthetics in Global Hip Hop. And ultimately, I think Black aesthetics, Africanist aesthetics are an underlying foundational structural element of hip hop that is often unnamed. So you mentioned Switzerland. I was introduced to Sabela in LA at a jam, but we didn't get to spend time until we were in Switzerland. They were teaching and I was researching, just trying to be present. And he and Moncell were both there. And we would stay up all night talking, because in my travels, in my efforts to spend time around breaking ciphers, and I focused on jams because I didn't already have a set of connections or friends, and any kind of anthropologist is like, you're supposed to go somewhere and stay a year, and I was like, I don't got nowhere to stay or nowhere to be with, so I just traveled the circuit of jams, and I met them, and it was during this trip to Europe where everywhere I went during the course of that trip, I felt like I was getting further away from my project. And the jams would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the ciphers would get more whack. And I was just like, what's happening? Because it didn't occur to me at that point that ciphering wasn't a given. It wasn't like a thing everybody knows how to do. So the conversation with you all, being able to share some of the things that were coming up for me, having, like, Moncell and I had an excited conversation because he was talking about the first time he came across Brenda Dixon Goshield's Digging the Africanist Presence, and I was like, oh my God. So I finally had someone to talk to, and it was really just like getting validation from folks who understood, but for whom there wasn't always a space for that conversation, for the depth of that conversation, the language involved in that conversation. And I realized in that trip a couple things. One, that I had footage of y'all dancing in Philly that I had just recorded. It was like my first excursion into ethnography. I went to that Philly jam, the B-Boy Barbecue. Yeah. And I have footage of you two dancing before I ever met you, because I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm writing on ciphers, because this is crazy. What are these dudes doing? And I'm, like a year later, it was just like, this one's on my couch. So, there was something to being able to speak to folks who understood my efforts to try to find language for the parts that were understood, not always vocalized. And that meant, especially in Europe, part of the stories they were telling was like, cats coming up to them like, let me show you my version of hip hop, and doing whatever the hell. And they'd just be like, what do you know? Like, what is, it's not anything, and then just slap a label on it, but that there's experimentation, there's those aesthetics that inform, like, needing to be original, needing to be able to engage in improvisation, needing to listen to the music, needing to, build on what somebody else did instead of crushing the energy. Like, there's all kinds of information in that, and all of that information, to me, that's part of the technology of Black aesthetics, that they're the resources with which generationally get picked up and reshaped and crafted in a way that allow us to heal, allow us to move forward, allow us to build community, that cultivate genres, and that in studying dance, to even begin to name the things that really matter required a disruption in how we think about things, how we're taught to think about the mind as separate from the body, how we're taught to think about the verbalization of a thing as superior to how it's embodied. To pay attention to dance necessitates shifting these ways of thinking that are foundational in Western thought, actually. And so there's already something philosophically happening. There are lessons built into that. So when I identify the Black aesthetics of hip hop, I'm not saying it's only for Black folks and y'all, anybody else is trespassing. What I'm suggesting is you're all already also being embedded in those aesthetics, but you're not necessarily, unless you've got brilliant teachers, they're not being identified as such. And so there's something to my contribution to the intellectual cipher around hip hop is offering language that allows people to carry those lessons with them and engage what that means in their world. I teach a hip hop dance lecture course at UCR where I'm housed, and the last time I taught it, it's a fairly small class, maybe like a dozen students, and all Asian or Asian American. And so I'm arming them with that language and scholarship that allows them to recognize both how they enter, but how to be there critically engaged and responsibly, and to recognize that you're building a relationship in your body to people and histories that are also like under just violent erasure. What is your responsibility in that? And so, yeah, I'll just in response to all that.
And how being critically engaged or just acknowledging could be part of your liberatory practice.
Exactly.
Right?
It's not me, so therefore I shouldn't. I just feel guilt and shame. Like, no,
exactly.
Actually, you're doing a thing. It's coming from somewhere. It's enabling you in this whole other set of ways. What do we do with that information? Because there are just generations of histories of people working like across all kinds of differences towards a more liberatory future. So this is part of it too. Why not shine some light on that?
Mm-hmm. I want to say something, but to that, like, I feel like sometimes people are not juxtaposing, like if you're coming from a different cultural practice, they're not juxtaposing, they're learning this thing as entertainment, when I'm always like, no, if you have to juxtapose this with your own lived practice. What if I'm explaining to you how spirituality is wrapped up in this? How does spirituality connect to you as it might pertain to dance? Is that even a thing? Is spirituality separate from it? And so you're engaging with it, understanding that this is a cultural dynamic. But if I understand that my national identity or my cultural identity is this thing, how am I able to let go of certain biases so I can really take this information into what Imani is saying and understand the human condition and where I can navigate and find my space in that? And are teachers bringing that up enough, or is it just about do the step? But no connection to the meaning of that, and then what that might even mean to you. As many times I see people do the nay-nay, but don't understand the context of the nay-nay, or hit them folks or whatever. So it's like understanding gestural practices, and what is the gestural practice that's most common in your community or your culture, to find an end to how you understand what another cultural practice is, and then you kind of find your place in it. But then to have a certain reverence and advocacy for participating in this culture and acknowledging the travesties that are happening and being a part of that conversation as well.
Absolutely. Isn't that breezy?
Yeah, I was interested in hearing what words folks have made up to be able to talk about the cultural forms that you study, because I feel like that's also very hip hop, is like make up words, right? And I know that, Imani, you're talking about finding the language, and I felt like in doing my scholarship, I had to make up words. And often I was drawing on, the language that I knew from the street dance communities, and so I was wondering if we could just throw out words that maybe you've made up along the way. And I know I'm talking even just in terms of pedagogies, because you have a pedagogy that you have now named,
I mean, they make up way better. I don't know if I really made up any real words.
Or concepts, dark matter, for example, as a way to think about your scholarship.
Yeah, I mean, that's a metaphor, technically, and I stole that from physics. But like oral kinesthetic was a term that I used to try to capture a music and movement simultaneity. Like there's a dynamic, there's a relationship and interdependence between what's happening musically and what's happening in the movement. And when you're in the academy, there's so much of you do this. Dance is a separate department from music, is a separate department from literature, is a second department from history, anthro, physics, math. Like, they're all separate, but they're also all not separate. Like, they're completely intertwined. So even just trying to create space within the language available to me to capture an idea that lives but not in the literature, because of the nature of writing and having to actually put things in words and put them in paragraphs and put them, like, there's, yeah, the effort is in trying to kind of maneuver through. Whenever I hear Sabela present, he's throwing out a brand new term that he's written there, and he makes sure you need to know how it's spelled, and you need to know what's like invoked and how it's spelled. Like, I deeply appreciate that. I think some of the most influential thinkers in my training were also poets. And I needed that. I needed to learn how to do the scholarship from people who had a very specific relationship to language and making language do what they needed and wanted it to do, even against its will. That was really foundational to my thinking.
That brought back a memory when I was doing my master's. I was crying at the keyboard, writing, like crying, and I thought, I love this, I wanted to do this job, but I didn't realize it was writing, and I didn't really enjoy the writing as much as I enjoyed the reading and ideas and talking about ideas, and the writing, I just thought, I'm just using the same words over and over. But making up words, I came up with Operation B-Droid in 2000, because at that time in breaking culture, people just say like B-boy, like a B-boy event, whatever, and as the only B-girl in my city, and one of the few B-girls in Canada at that time, I hated it. And I also felt really like I would have really got involved in the non-binary kind of ways of thinking about gender, because I was already there. I was like, I don't want to dance like a girl, I don't want to dance like a guy, I just really want to explore who I am in the world, and it's not a performance of kind of a gender for me, and I don't live in that space. So yeah, I called an event Operation B-Droid and was already trying to explore language as a dancer that kind of worked, made robotic flyers. It was cool, worked with artists and made it really nice. But I think I lost some of that in the transition to the academy. I think I didn't find language fun for a long time. So I get really inspired hearing Sabela flipping things and playing with it more. So, and I think that's generational too. Like the people now coming up under me, I'm trying to create a little bit more space for them to keep it hip-hop in the academy, and that's a hard thing to play around with in mentorship, because some of the things that break us make us stronger, and we know that from hip-hop. When you lose a battle or you have to go home and rethink how you were in a space, sometimes you can grow a lot from that, and I grew a lot from a lot of the challenges I had going through grad school. So yeah, just for teachers out there, and that it's interesting to think of that balance of how much people can take, how much we want to keep bringing that energetic, artistic energy into their practices of research, but how to still challenge people to grow. Like, I don't want it to be a space where people aren't being challenged enough. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Hey. So, yeah, I was talking to Sabela today about one of his pieces that I guess he did like 20 years ago, and he was like, oh, you're talking about 40 acres and a microchip? Just casually, right? Like 40 acres and a microchip, right? Like, and making me think about inventive scholarship, right? And absolutely positively in a Black context, Black American context, although this extends to the Caribbean as well, but what it means to rename, the political nature of renaming ourselves is important here, and so, going into my third year as a PhD student, Goldsmiths University in London is interesting because they encourage original thought in a way that is super, super intimidating, because I'm like, yeah, DJ scholarship, and from that, I am now thinking about turntable epistemologies, right? Like, and how to define that. I'm getting I'm like, oh, damn, now you're actually asking me to produce original thought based on the naming. Sometimes with Black folks, it stops at the naming. That is the work. It actually is the word, turntable epistemology. That's what we're talking about, DJs and knowledge production. That's it, I named it, right? But what does it mean to, now you're asking me to write a damn chapter on it. Damn, I told you what I said, what I meant, right? No, but I was really trying to think about language to capture the complexity of the 80s, right? Like, what does it mean that all this amazing music emerges from this super dark time? What does it mean that people were going into clubs and, having sex and dying, right? And so I was thinking about fatal pleasure, right? Like, I was thinking about misery resistance, and trying to kind of reckon with that disappearing dance floor, right? Like, and that's a lot to unpack. Fatal pleasure. Are we talking about, crack addiction in this context? Are we talking about what might happen in these continental bathhouses when folks are simply having sex and enjoying themselves, leaving the club and discovering that they too have this disease and not returning to the club? There's one less body in the club. How do we name that?
Yeah, the last chapter of my book talks about this dance form called whacking punking, which, resurged. I think of it in the 2000s when it resurges into the global battle scene as a reinvented style, and it's very much because of that moment, that rupture in the 80s, and specifically within the LA history of AIDS and incarceration in the 80s, because the originators, the first generation of that form, of that dance, a lot of them disappeared. There's a lot of disappearing that happens in hip-hop street dance histories. Like, even in the context of locking, we have Scooby-Doo, who's back with us. But for a long time, people actually thought Scooby-Doo was dead. And his story is really complex, and it's very complex, and it speaks to this way that we in street dance are always in this practice of mourning. And so the word that I came up with in that chapter to talk about these complex histories was dance sentences. So to think about the ways that the dancers, our dancestors, live on in our bodies, in our body, our collective social body, as we dance, we actually bring them back to life. We're always calling on them, and they are always calling on us. And so the work of mourning is not just individual. Through street dance, it's actually collective. We make an individual practice into a collective work of mourning, and through that, we actually also process our grief in the context of celebration and joy. So that was one. One way. I love this idea of making up words because we have to. We can't just go with the words the languages that are given to us.
And the title of your book,
yes.
Kinethic.
Yeah. Yeah. That. So that also draws really on the work of three important scholars: Denise Ferreira da Silva, who's she's a Brazilian political philosopher and sociologist by training, and she wrote this really important essay or article called Black Feminist Poethics. And in the word poethics, she's actually drawing on a Martinican philosopher and poet, Edward Glissant, who wrote a book called Poetics of Relation. And so those two works are really important to me in thinking about this idea of kinethic, as well as Sylvia Wynter, who is a Jamaican philosopher and essayist writer who's got a huge body of work, and also talks about the roots, talks about culture, cultural forms coming out of this ethics of relation. So those three scholars, Denise Ferreira da Silva, Sylvia Wynter, and Eduardo Glissant, were really important to this idea of kinethic, because I wanted to talk about, what are the sort of ethical ways that we form kinship bonds as dancers? What are our ethical obligations, not only to each other, but in life, but also to the dead? to the dance sisters who we continue to honor through our work and through passing on our cultural traditions. Because kinship, like biological kinship, right? That was like a primary thing that was, of course, like taken from enslaved people, like, the fundamental like uprooting from land, but also the fundamental destroying of kinship relations. So as Imani was saying, in terms of like the Black aesthetics that live on in these styles, we continue to find ways to practice kinship in order to resist the idea that our relations can be erased or destroyed. And so when we look at the dance forms, and we don't look at them just as separate styles that can be objectified and separated and made static, but we look at them as dynamic forms that are always in relation to each other, we actually honor the kinds of ways that we practice kinship that go beyond biology. And so Kinethic is trying to create language to point to that. I feel like one thing that I began to really realize in doing my scholarship is that sometimes we're so conditioned to accept our oppression. When I say we, I just mean generally, humanity. And so sometimes we adopt the modes of our oppressors, and we adopt the belief in what is supposedly our value or non-value, and we don't actually look to the real values that are embedded in our cultural forms. We don't look to the forms to tell us, the philosophy. Academia has historically been about going in and taking the object and then enforcing sort of like ways of thinking, European-centered ways of thinking onto that object and saying this is what this object is and why it's important. But I think what hopefully hip-hop scholarship can do is actually go to the object and understand that object as containing the knowledge, the embodied knowledge in the circumstance of dance, as being able to tell us what is our value. So, like I talk about this idea of polycentric dance histories, for example, and that came to me by looking at Boogaloo style. I don't know who does Boogaloo. I know there's some folks over there in the corner that maybe they could even jump up and demonstrate a little bit of Boogaloo style, because I think it's important to actually look at what the body is doing to understand, like an embodied way, how the aesthetic and the philosophy is contained within the form. So, are you about to demonstrate?
I am not.
You getting busy?
I know there's some poppers in that.
There ain't no music playing. Don't you love when people be like, get up and dance? There ain't no funk playing. Like, what are we doing?
Because polycentrism in Boogaloo, polycentrism as an aesthetic, as an African aesthetic, is about multiple centers. It's about multiple centers being in rhythm. And I think that's a way that we can talk about hip-hop dance histories, is this idea that, we actually don't come from just a single origin. That's a Eurocentric way of like, oh, there's one history and there's one single origin, but actually our histories are always moving in relation and in rhythm with each other. And that we actually see through the practice of the dance. And so our language for talking about these dances and these cultural forms, actually, we can look to the dance to tell us what that language should be.
If we're listening, right, we hear it, right? We see it, we feel it. How y'all doing out there? Yeah?
Just real quick, I don't necessarily have any words, but...
He just said beats, dance. Yo, dance, the acronym is...
Those are acronyms.
Okay, my bad.
I have plenty of acronyms, not necessarily words. And so I gave y'all the one on dance. Another one is the word art, because for a while I was really grappling personally with people saying dance was an art form. And I was like, is it? And I needed to make sense of that for me. I didn't challenge anybody on it. I just needed to make sense for it for me. And so I inspired by Dr. Ernie Smith, linguist, I think about words and then I redefine them based on the dictionary. So art for me is the awareness, reflective, and transcendentalism, which makes sense to me now. Like, okay, yeah, it is art because it is reflecting that part of the lived experience. I gave you dance. The title, I think it's the subtitle actually, of my article in the book, History and Heritage. The breakdown of history and heritage is his, T-O, and R-Y. His reflecting to, belonging, or associated to male energy. Two means going in a direction with purpose and intention, right? You can look this stuff up in the dictionary. RY denotes class conditional behavior. So therefore, history becomes man's telling of time in purpose, in a direction, denoting class conditional behavior. The reason I said history and heritage is because for me, hip hop focuses too much on history and not enough on heritage. History comes down to names, dates, times, places, and I'm like, this is deeper than that. So with heritage, her, associated with belonging to, represented by female energy, And for anybody that wants to get into a gender thing, when you think about the word female, Fe is a chemical compound for iron, Ma is an ancient word for mother, and Le is the least significant thing in any word. So it still comes back to iron mother. Even if you said male, Ma is still ancient word for mother. But it is a known situation or happening. Age represents the length of time. So now we are talking about women, the idea of feminine energy that is passing something down the line that is a known happening through a length of time. And for me, that represents the heritage that's underneath all the stuff we're doing, not just fixated on one thing. And so the only word that would come to mind, and this is still, I wouldn't say this is a word, maybe a phrase, that it still has an acronym in it, for what I describe as what I do, which is looking at the morphology of Afro-kinetic memory, Afro being awareness, frequency representing origin story. And so I don't think I make up words per se, but I'll look at a word and redefine it, maybe in a creative way, I don't know.
That's why on the block they'd be like, yo, Moncell, he got that acronymic flow. How y'all doing? So obviously we're not opening this up for a Q&A. But we are gonna cipher a little bit. Y'all cool with that? So my partner right here, also on faculty here at the Glorya Kaufman School of Dance, Nina Flagg, AKA Fly Shay. Y'all better respect the knives, stop playing. So we got some questions. Damn, I just snatched it back off. My bad, come on in the light.
Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi. So please give this esteemed panel of scholars, artists, human beings another round of applause. We are beyond grateful to have them with us and sharing this information. And we have a little something for the audience members. We have a book giveaway. Yes, but you will have to participate. We talked about hip-hop culture and the culture being a conversation, right? So you will have to participate in order to get your gift, okay? So we're just gonna ask some questions. Some of them will be callbacks to things that you experienced earlier in the evening. And so we have 4 amazing books, and I just wanna tell you what you have before you and what's the selection of books before you. So we have Chaos Theory, the Afro-Cosmic Arc of Ben Caldwell, by Taj Frazier. Yes. We also have Why Willie Mae Thornton Matters by DJ Lene Denise. We have 1 copy, so it's very exclusive, yes. We have The Battle, wow. We have Dark Matter and Breaking Ciphers by Dr. Imani Kai Johnson. That's right. We also have the Oxford Handbook of Hip Hop Dance Studies, edited by Dr. Mary Fogarty and Dr. Imani Kai Johnson, with contributions from our esteemed panelists. Yes, it's a big round of applause. So when you come up to collect your gift, you have a choice, right? So choose wisely, okay?
And if you take this, you better be ready to battle.
Yeah, there's one. All right, so we're gonna just open this up. Just gonna give it to the first person that I hear. You can shout it out, right? And audience, you can also help me out. We're on the honor system. So the first person that we hear shout out one of the answers, come on up and claim your prize. Are you ready? Yeah. Ready. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Name one of the 4 cultural elements of DJ scholarship by DJ Lene. Come on up. I heard liner notes. Come on up. You called out something. What was that? Say it loud. Say it with your chest. Black musical geography. Ooh, I appreciate that, but it's not one of the 4. Come on up, claim your prize. Yes. Anyone else? Anyone else? Yes. Come on up. Come on up. Chasing samples. Come on up. So the question was, name one of the 4 cultural elements of DJ scholarship by DJ Lene. All right. Okay. Okay. Nice. Do we have anyone else? Any other answers? Okay, I heard 2 people say that at the same time. Okay. I can only choose one. Who said it first? Tell me which way to go. Tell me which way to go. There'll be other opportunities. We have 2 over here. Come on up. Claim your gift. Yes, come on up. Don't worry, there are more opportunities. There are other trivia questions. Yes. All right. So this next one involves an embodied practice. Okay, we need a brave soul to come up and demonstrate a dominant gesture related to hip hop culture that you remember either from your childhood or your upbringing. So we're talking about a dominant gesture, right, that may be applicable to your generation when you think about hip hop culture, right? So think about that for a bit, but you will need to come up and actually embody that gesture. Come on up. Give it to us. Turn to the audience. All right, we got yes. Yes, that's right. That's right. In your b-boy stance, that's right. Okay. Yes, come on, come center, come. What? Okay. Some dap. Dap it up. Dap it up. Dap it up. Hey. That's right. Thank you. Make a selection. Anyone else? Any brave soul want to come up? Right? A dominant gesture. Come on up. Yes. Come on. Don't be shy. It's a safe space. Hey, yes, yes. Absolutely. Thank you. We have 4 more books left. So this one is a little bit of outside of the box. It's maybe general hip hop knowledge, but let's just see. So the letter B in the term B-boy or B-girl or B-droid stands for multiple things. Can someone name one? The letter B in the term B-boy, B-girl. You already have a book. Yes. Come on up, come on up, come on up and claim your prize. Bronx boy. Mm-hmm. There's more. Thank you. Who said that? Come on up. Boogie boy, boogie girl, come on up. Boogie droid. Boogie. Mm-hmm. We have 2 more books. Anybody else? Who said that? Come on up and claim your prize. Break boy, break girl, break droid. I love that. Yes. Good. we have one more book left. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. Name one of the 4 main elements of hip hop culture. Come on. Come on. Come on, come on up, come on up, come on up. The DJ. Yes, yes. That's right, that's right. All right, yes. All right, so that concludes our book giveaway. Thank you everyone for participating. Yes. I'm gonna throw this back over to Sabela as we prepare for the next part of our evening, which is our workshop. I'm gonna make sure that everything is flowing over there. So thank you everyone. And I
Give it up for Nina Fly. Thank you. We want to give so much splash, so much gratitude at this amazing group of people. Starting with DJ Lene Denise, give it up. Dr. Imani Kai Johnson, give it up. Dr. Naomi Bragin, give it up. Moncell Durden, the Ilkas, give it up. Dr. Mary Fogarty, thank you. We really appreciate you all coming out. Big ups to Visions and Voices. Big ups to the Glorya Kaufman School of Dance. There's a couple people. We have more events happening. On the 30th, there's going to be our party on McCarthy Quad. The DJ is sitting right there. Versus Style will be performing. Versus Style Legacy will be performing. All world. It's not a game. Who else is going to be? Who else? Oh, I think they left already. But it's ain't nothing but a party, y'all. That's what they said. We really appreciate you all coming out. Remember, Visions and Voices on October 18th or 19th, Efrat? Ashery? The 19th, yes. Come on out just for some more dance and Kinethic flavor. We appreciate you. Yeah, you want to?
I just wanted to say something, not that I need to wrap it up.
Say something.
For me, I'm just going to keep it short, actually. It was very healing for me to come in, and my first impression to see fierce women on stage talking and sharing their narratives, and of course Moncell and Sabela, I love you guys too, but to just see that, we don't often see that. So just to come in and see that display, I was next to her, I'm like, oh, look at these women. Like, it's desperately needed. I'm so happy we're here. But then at the same time, it makes me sad that I missed out at that as a young woman, how I craved that. And I have my own trauma revolving school and education and what that did to me. But I just wanted to celebrate this moment to see such powerful, beautiful people of color on stage, representing, sharing their narratives, and just being badasses. Thank you. Truly know that you're inspiring many, many people that need to hear you, including me. So I just needed to acknowledge that. And y'all are gorgeous too, and you too, all of you.
We also got another beat droid. I'm gonna Mary Howard, also a contributor to the book, to the Oxford. Thank you for coming out. And just listen, these events are so fly at Kaufman. I know this every time you leave Kaufman, you're like, how did they just put together such amazing events? We got to give it up to Dane and all of Dance Ops. Shout out to RYBG. We are going to end this just by saying, like, just think about something that you're grateful for. Just think about it. Move it from your head and let it fill your heart space. And to amplify that gratitude, on the count of 3, we will clap together. Y'all ready? 1, 2, 3. Peace, y'all. Enjoy your evening.